The great hall of the Galactic Assembly was quiet. Too quiet. 200 delegates from 17 different species sat in their floating seats, watching the holographic display at the center of the chamber. The display showed a blue and green planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth, the human homeworld. Ambassador Thelnox stood at the speaker's platform. His forearms gestured at the data streaming across secondary screens. His skin, normally a calm blue, flickered with orange stress patterns. He had spent 3 months preparing this presentation, 3 months studying the species that called themselves humans. Honored delegates, Thelnox began, his voice carried by translators to every corner of the hall. I stand before you to discuss Application 7 Beta 9, submitted by the species Homo sapiens. They seek trade rights and membership in our assembly. I must recommend we deny this application. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Velkari Confederacy had welcomed 43 new species in the last century alone. Rejection was rare. Thelnox felt the weight of every eye upon him. Let me show you why, he continued. The holographic display shifted. Earth rotated before them and red markers began appearing across its surface. Hundreds of them. Thousands. This planet is classified as a Class 14 hazard world, the highest danger rating in our database. To put this in perspective, my own homeworld rates a Class 3. He pulled up more data. The gravity is 1.3 times standard. The atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, a highly reactive and toxic gas that causes cellular damage over time. The planet experiences regular catastrophic weather events, hurricanes with wind speeds exceeding 200 units per hour, earthquakes that reshape continents, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts. A delegate from the peaceful Minorian collective raised a tentacle. Surely the inhabitants live in protected cities away from these dangers. Thelnox's skin darkened to deep purple. No, they live everywhere. In frozen wastelands where temperatures drop low enough to freeze blood. In deserts where no water exists for hundreds of distance units, on the slopes of active volcanoes. They thrive in conditions that would kill most of us within hours. He changed the display again. Now it showed human anatomy. The delegates leaned forward, curious and horrified in equal measure. Their biology is equally concerning. Humans evolved as pursuit predators. Their eyes face forward for tracking prey. They possess extreme endurance, capable of running for days without stopping. Their bodies regulate temperature through water excretion, allowing them to outlast nearly any other creature on their planet. But surely, another delegate interjected, they are fragile like other predator species? Quick but delicate? Thelnox made a negative gesture. No, observe their skeletal structure. Dense calcium-based bones that can withstand tremendous impact. They have redundant systems throughout their body. 2 kidneys when one would suffice. 2 lungs. Even their brain is partially redundant, with each half capable of compensating for damage to the other. He pulled up medical footage that made several delegates look away. They heal at remarkable speeds. Broken bones mend in weeks. Cuts seal themselves in days. They can survive blood loss that would kill any species in this chamber. They can function with damaged organs, missing limbs, or catastrophic injuries that defy our understanding of biological limits. There is more, Thelnox said quietly. Their planet is not just dangerous because of weather and geology. The fauna, the animals, are equally hostile. Images appeared of creatures from Earth. This is what humans call a bear. It weighs 400 kilograms and can tear through metal with its claws. This is a crocodile, an ambush predator that has existed unchanged for millions of years. This is a shark, an ocean predator with hundreds of serrated teeth. This is a mosquito, an insect so deadly it has killed more humans than any other creature through disease transmission. The chamber was silent now. Every delegate stared at the parade of horrors from the human homeworld. And yet, Thelnox continued, humans are the apex species. They dominated every one of these creatures. They conquered their entire planet. They bent that deadly world to their will through intelligence, cooperation, and relentless determination. He paused, letting the information sink in. The question before us is simple. Do we allow this species into our peaceful society? A species forged in violence, built to survive the unsurvivable, evolved to hunt and persist and never give up? What happens when their world no longer challenges them? When they look to the stars for new frontiers? The display changed one final time, showing human military footage. Soldiers training, ships launching, weapons testing. They have been spacefaring for only 300 years, yet they already have colonies on 12 worlds in their system. They build ships faster than we can count them. They develop weapons technology at a pace that frightens our analysts, and most concerning, they have been listening to our communications. They know we are here. They know about the assembly. They want to join us. Thelnox's skin settled into a determined red. I do not question their intelligence or their achievements. I question whether our peaceful civilization can coexist with a species literally built for survival at any cost. I recommend we maintain the quarantine protocols. Keep them in their solar system until we better understand what they truly are. The vote was called. Delegates entered their decisions into the system. Thelnox watched the tally appear on his personal display. The result was unanimous. Application denied. Humanity would remain isolated. Far above the assembly chamber, in the darkness between stars, a human colony ship called the Perseverance drifted. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair, watching the transmission from the Galactic Assembly. Her crew gathered around her, their faces a mixture of disappointment and resignation. They said no. Her first officer stated the obvious. Sarah nodded slowly. They're afraid of us. Can't blame them, really. We did evolve on a planet that tried to kill us every day. So what do we do now, Captain? Sarah looked at the star maps on her screen. So many civilizations out there. So many species living together in peace, and humanity on the outside looking in. We wait, she said finally. We respect their decision. We continue building our colonies. We keep listening to their broadcasts. And maybe one day circumstances will change. Maybe one day they'll see us differently. She stood and addressed her crew. We're not monsters. We're survivors. And survivors are patient. Our time will come. The Perseverance turned slowly, orienting itself back toward Earth, back toward home, back to the quarantine that would last for decades. But the stars were still there, still waiting. And humans were very, very good at waiting. The research station on Nephorus 7th was small, peaceful, and very far from anything important. Dr. Kelvin liked it that way. She supervised a team of 12 scientists studying the ancient ruins that dotted this frontier world. The Velkari had found these ruins on 17 different planets, all abandoned millions of years ago. The species that built them had vanished completely, leaving only questions behind. Doctor, her assistant called from the observation deck. We have something on long-range sensors, a ship. Very old design. Kelvin moved to the display. The image showed a massive vessel drifting through space, dark and dead. Its hull was covered in symbols that matched the ruins perfectly. A predecessor ship. After 200 years of searching, they had finally found one intact. Alert the Colonial Authority, Kelvin said, her voice shaking with excitement. And prepare the shuttle. We are going over there. The regulations were clear. Unknown vessels were to be reported and studied from a distance. Boarding operations required military escort and extensive safety protocols. But Kelvin had spent her entire career studying the predecessors. This was the discovery of a lifetime. Regulations could be flexible. 4 hours later, her team floated through the corridors of the ancient ship. Their suit lights cut through darkness that had lasted for millennia. Everything was perfectly preserved in the vacuum of space. Control systems, storage chambers, living quarters designed for beings twice as tall as any modern species. The power systems are still intact, her assistant reported, scanning a massive reactor core, dormant but functional. Incredible engineering. Kelvin found what she was looking for in the command center, a database terminal, its screens dark but undamaged. Her hands trembled as she connected her portable computer to the ancient system. If she could access their records, learn their language, understand why they vanished, the connection completed. The terminal activated. Lights began appearing across the command center, red and urgent. A sound filled the ship, a deep pulsing alarm that made Kelvin's bones vibrate. What did you do? Her assistant shouted over the noise. I do not know. I only connected the reader. The terminal screen filled with symbols. Kelvin's translator struggled with the ancient language, but fragments appeared in her display. Warning. Beacon active. Quarantine breach. They are coming. Run. Turn it off. Kelvin shouted, pulling her connector free. But the damage was done. Throughout the ship, systems were waking up after millions of years of sleep. And somewhere deep in the reactor core, something was broadcasting a signal into space. a signal that traveled faster than light, reaching out into the dark between galaxies. Kelvin and her team evacuated the ship immediately. They reported everything to the Colonial Authority. Teams of military experts arrived within days, securing the vessel and trying to decode the warning. But the signal had already been sent, and far away something received it. The Ketrak swarm had been sleeping for 2 million years. They drifted in the void between galaxies, their biological ships hibernating, waiting. They had consumed the predecessors, harvested their worlds, absorbed their knowledge. Then they had moved on, searching for new feeding grounds. But the galaxy they targeted had been empty of intelligent life, offering nothing worth the energy expenditure. So they had slept, conserving resources, waiting for the signal that meant new prey had evolved. The signal came. The swarm woke up. 3 weeks after Kelvan's discovery, the first swarm ships entered Velkari space. They moved in complete silence. Biological vessels grown rather than built, each one the size of a small moon. They did not respond to communications. They did not slow down. They went straight for Nephara 7. The Colonial Defense Fleet consisted of 12 ships designed for patrol duties and anti-pirate operations. They formed a defensive line between the swarm and the planet. Commander Thosnell sent one final transmission to the colony below, telling them to evacuate to underground shelters. Then he gave the order to fire. The defense fleet's weapons were state-of-the-art. Particle beams that could cut through armor. Missiles with antimatter warheads. Electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable enemy systems. They threw everything they had at the approaching swarm. The first swarm ship absorbed the particle beam, its hull rippling like liquid. The missiles detonated against its surface, causing damage that healed within seconds. The EMP had no effect at all. The ship did not even slow down, then it fired back. Biological projectiles erupted from its surface, moving impossibly fast. They struck the defense fleet ships and burrowed inside, growing and spreading like cancer. Commander Thosnell watched in horror as his ships were converted from the inside out, their metal hulls sprouting organic matter, their systems corrupted and absorbed. "All ships retreat," he ordered. But only 3 vessels escaped. The others were already gone, transformed into something else, joining the swarm. The swarm landed on Nephara 7 12 hours later. The colony had 12 million inhabitants. Most reached the underground shelters in time. They sealed the doors and listened through sensors as the nightmare unfolded above. The swarm did not conquer. It consumed. Every living thing on the surface was harvested. Trees, grass, animals, any Velkari who had not reached shelter in time. The biological matter was processed and used to grow more swarm units. Drones scuttled across the planet's surface, hunting for more resources. They began digging toward the shelters. Ambassador Thelnox received the reports in the Galactic Assembly's Emergency Command Center. His skin had gone completely white with shock. The military analysts projected the swarm's spread. If they took Nephara 7 completely, they would have enough resources to reproduce exponentially. Within a month, they could threaten the entire sector. Within 6 months, the whole galaxy. The combined fleet is being mobilized, the military coordinator reported, but it will take 3 weeks to gather enough ships. 4 weeks to reach Nephara 7th. The people in the shelters do not have 4 weeks, Thelnox said quietly. The swarm will reach them in days. Then they are lost, the coordinator said, her voice empty. We do not have any assets close enough to help them. A junior communications officer spoke up, his voice hesitant. Sir, there is one ship within range. The human colony vessel Perseverance. They have been monitoring our broadcasts. They know what is happening. The command center went silent. Every eye turned to Thelnox. The same ambassador who had argued for humanity's quarantine. Who had called them too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. If we send a distress call on open channels, the officer continued, they will hear it. The quarantine protocols say we cannot formally request their aid, but there is nothing preventing us from broadcasting our situation. Thelnox looked at the display showing Nephara 7, 12 million people huddling in darkness while monsters dug toward them. His own people. His responsibility. Send the distress call, he said. Open channels. Emergency frequency. Let everyone hear it. Including the humans, sir? Thelnox's skin flickered through a dozen colors, emotions he could not name. Fear, hope, desperation. Especially the humans. May the ancestors forgive us, but we are out of options. Send the call. The message went out across the stars. A cry for help from a civilization that had rejected the only species that might be able to answer. And in the darkness, on a ship far from home, humans heard that cry. The bridge of the Perseverance was quiet when the distress call came through. Captain Sarah Chen had been reviewing supply reports, the mundane work of keeping a colony ship running. Then her communications officer stiffened in his seat. "Captain, we are receiving an emergency broadcast, Valkyrie frequency. It is on all channels." Sarah set down her tablet. "Play it." The voice that filled the bridge was strained, translated by their computer into English. "This is the Galactic Assembly Emergency Command. The colony world Nephra 7 is under attack by an unknown hostile force. 12 million civilians are trapped in underground shelters. The enemy is consuming all biological matter and will reach the shelters within 72 hours. Our nearest military assets are 26 days away. We are broadcasting this message in hopes that anyone within range can provide assistance. Coordinates attached. This is a Code Omega situation. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." The message repeated. Sarah looked around her bridge. Every member of her crew was staring at her, waiting. She pulled up the coordinates. Nephra 7 was 16 light years away. The Perseverance could make that in 4 days if they pushed the engines hard. Really hard. "They rejected us," her first officer said quietly. 6 months ago, they voted to keep us in quarantine. Called us too dangerous. "I remember," Sarah replied. She looked at the tactical display. 12 million people. Men, women, children. Aliens, yes, but people nonetheless. Living beings huddling in the dark, waiting for death to dig them out. Navigation, plot a course to Nephra 7. Engineering, I need maximum speed. Forget the safety margins. We are going to burn the engines hot. "Captain," her first officer protested, "we have 3,000 colonists on this ship. If we push too hard and damage the drives, we could be stranded." Sarah stood up, her voice firm. "And if we do nothing, 12 million people will die. Plot the course. Send a response on the same frequency they used." Her communications officer's hands moved across his console. "What should I say, Captain?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Keep it simple. Tell them to hold on. We are coming." The message went out across the stars. 3 words that would change everything. "We are coming." The response hit the galaxy like a shockwave. In the Galactic Assembly Command Center, Ambassador Thelnox read the message over and over, unable to believe it. The humans were responding. The Deathworlders were actually coming to help. "Get me everything we have on human military capabilities," he ordered. "Ship specifications, weapon systems, tactical doctrines, everything." The intelligence reports were not encouraging. Human ships were fast but lightly armored compared to Valkyrie standards. Their weapons relied heavily on kinetic energy and chemical explosives, primitive compared to particle beam technology. They had no experience fighting a threat like the swarm, but there were notes in the files that made Thelnox's skin prickle. Humans had a history of warfare unlike anything in the known galaxy. They had fought wars on their deadly homeworld for thousands of years. They understood violence in ways that peaceful species could not comprehend. The reports included footage of human military training, soldiers running through obstacle courses that would kill a Valkyrie, practicing close combat with their bare hands, jumping from aircraft at altitudes that made no sense. "They are insane," the military coordinator said, watching the footage. "Look at them. They smile while training to kill. They treat combat like a sport." "Perhaps," Thelnox said slowly, "that is exactly what we need right now." Across the galaxy, news of the human response spread rapidly. Every species monitored the situation. The humans had been an abstract threat before. A distant concern kept safely behind quarantine borders. Now they were moving and everyone wanted to see what would happen. The Minorian Collective held an emergency session. Should we assist the humans? Provide intelligence on the swarm? And reveal our capabilities to the Deathworlders? Absolutely not. But if the humans fail, the swarm will spread. This concerns all of us. The debate raged, but no consensus emerged. The Minorians, like everyone else, would watch and wait. On the Perseverance, Sarah pushed her ship harder than she had ever dared. The engines screamed their protest, running at 115% capacity. Her chief engineer reported stress fractures forming in the engine mounts. Sarah ordered him to reinforce them and keep going. "We should arrive in 4 days at this speed," her navigator reported. "But Captain, the combined fleet will not reach Nephra 7 for another 23 days. We will be alone against that thing for weeks. Sarah studied the intelligence reports on the swarm. The footage from the Defense Fleet's final stand was horrifying. Ships consumed from the inside out, weapons that had no effect, an enemy that adapted and learned from every attack. Assemble the senior staff, she ordered, and get me the Marine commander. We need to plan this carefully. Commander Marcus Webb arrived at the meeting with his top officers. The Marines on the Perseverance were supposed to be a small security detail for a colony ship. 300 soldiers, lightly equipped, meant to handle civil disturbances and pirate threats. Now they were heading toward something that had destroyed a military fleet. Show them the footage, Sarah said. The Marines watched in silence as the swarm consumed Nefara 7th. When it ended, Webb spoke first. That is one ugly customer. Biological self-replicating adapts to weapons. What is our objective? Simple, Sarah replied. Keep 12 million civilians alive until the combined fleet arrives. That means we need to stop the swarm from reaching those underground shelters. For 3 weeks, with 300 Marines. Webb did not sound discouraged, just calculating. We are going to need to get creative. That is what humans do best, Sarah said. We get creative. Ideas? The planning session lasted for hours. Humans had an advantage that peaceful species lacked. They understood asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, psychological warfare. Humans had been fighting impossible odds on their deadly homeworld for millennia. This was just another Tuesday. The swarm uses biological matter to reproduce, Webb noted, so we deny it resources. Burn everything on the surface. Leave nothing for it to consume. It will adapt, another officer pointed out, so we adapt faster. Stay mobile. Never let it predict our next move. Use the terrain. Force it to fight in confined spaces where its numbers mean nothing. Sarah listened as her people brainstormed solutions. This was the human advantage. Not strength or speed or advanced technology, but the ability to look at an impossible situation and refuse to accept defeat. 3 days into their journey, they received another transmission from Nefara 7th. The swarm had reached the first shelter. The doors were holding, but not for long. The desperate broadcast ended with screaming in the background. Sarah stood on her bridge watching the countdown timer. 18 hours until they reached Nefara 7th. Behind them, dozens of escort ships followed, smaller and faster than the Perseverance. Cruisers, destroyers, and assault carriers. The entire human fleet in this sector, racing toward a battle they could not avoid. All ships, this is Captain Chen. She broadcast to the fleet. In 18 hours, we are going to show the galaxy what humans do when someone needs help. We are going to show them why our ancestors survived the Ice Age, the plagues, the wars, and every other nightmare our planet threw at us. We survive, we fight, we protect, and we never ever give up. She looked at her crew, seeing their determined faces. They think we are monsters because we come from a death world. Let us show them what that really means. Let us show them that Deathworlders protect the living. The Perseverance screamed through space, its engines burning white-hot, racing toward a planet where nightmares walked and 12 million souls prayed for salvation. And in the darkness, the swarm felt something it had not felt in 2 million years. A new prey approaching, a new species to consume and study. It prepared itself, adapting its biology, spawning new forms, ready to add humanity to its collection of extinct civilizations. The swarm had no way of knowing that it had just made a terrible mistake. Because humans do not accept extinction. They fight back. The galaxy was about to learn what happens when you threaten something a human has decided to protect. The Perseverance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Nefara 7 system. Captain Sarah Chen took one look at the tactical display and felt her blood run cold. The planet below was covered in a living carpet of swarm biomass. Organic structures stretched across continents, pulsing and growing. In orbit, 3 massive swarm ships waited, each one spawning smaller attack craft like a hive producing bees. They have grown, her tactical officer reported. Estimates suggest swarm mass has increased by 40% since the initial reports. They are consuming everything. Sarah opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships combat formation. Destroyers, clear us a path. Marines, prep for immediate drop. We are going in hot. The human fleet moved as one. The destroyers accelerated ahead, their railguns spooling up. The Velkari ships had used energy weapons against the swarm. The humans had something different. Solid metal slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Simple. Brutal. Effective. The first railgun volley tore through a swarm ship, punching holes the size of houses through its organic hull. The creature screamed, a sound that traveled through space on radio frequencies, making Sarah's skin crawl. But it did not die. The holes began closing, flesh knitting together, adapting to the damage. Second volley, explosive rounds. Sarah ordered. Blow it apart before it can heal. The destroyers fired again. This time the rounds detonated inside the swarm ship, rupturing it from within. Biological matter scattered across space, freezing instantly in the void. The ship died finally, its pieces drifting apart. Two more engaging, the tactical officer called. They are launching attack craft. Hundreds of them. Point defense, free fire. Do not let them get close. The human ships lit up with weapons fire. Machine guns, laser point defense, missile interceptors. The swarm attack craft flew through the storm, dying by the dozens. But more kept coming. They slammed into the human ships, trying to burrow through the hulls. Coating is holding, engineering reported. The anti-biological sealant is working. They cannot penetrate, that was the human advantage. They had studied the intelligence reports. They had adapted. Every ship in the fleet had been coated with a chemical compound that prevented biological matter from adhering to it. The swarm's infection tactics failed against prepared humans. Sarah watched the orbital battle with half her attention. The other half was on the planet below. Marines go. All drop pods, launch now. The assault carriers opened their bays. 300 drop pods fell toward Nephara 7, small and fast, their heat shields glowing as they hit the atmosphere. Inside each pod, a human Marine sat strapped into a crash seat, weapons ready, hearts pounding with adrenaline. Commander Marcus Webb felt his pod shake violently as it descended. The altimeter counted down rapidly. 5,000 meters. 3,000. 1,000. Impact. The pod hit the ground at terminal velocity, its dampeners absorbing most of the shock. Most, but not all. Webb felt his bones compress, his organs shift. A Valkyrie would have died from the impact. Webb just grunted and hit the release. The pod doors blew off. Webb stepped out into hell. The surface of Nephara 7 was unrecognizable. Organic matter covered everything, pulsing and writhing. Swarm drones scuttled toward his position, drawn by the impact. They looked like a nightmare combination of insect and machine, with too many legs and mouths that split open to reveal acidic projectiles. Webb raised his rifle and fired. The armor-piercing rounds punched through chitin and flesh. The drones fell, but more kept coming. All around him, other pods were landing, other Marines emerging. They formed defensive perimeters instantly, training taking over. Second platoon, secure the perimeter. Third platoon, set up the heavy weapons. First platoon with me. Webb led his Marines toward the nearest shelter entrance. Intelligence had marked it on their maps, a heavy blast door built into a hillside. The door was covered in swarm biomass, organic matter attempting to corrode through the metal. Dozens of larger swarm creatures surrounded it, working to break through. Light them up. The Marines opened fire. But these were not small drones. These were warrior forms, evolved for combat. They had thick armor and moved with terrifying speed. One reached a Marine before he could reload, its claws raised for a killing strike. Webb tackled the creature, his augmented strength letting him grapple with something twice his size. They rolled across the organic ground, the creature's mandibles snapping inches from his face. Webb pulled a grenade from his belt, shoved it into the creature's mouth, and threw himself clear. The explosion painted the landscape with biological matter. Webb stood up, checked his weapon, and kept moving. This was what humans did. They fought up close. They adapted. They refused to die. Webb, this is Chen, his radio crackled. We are reading massive swarm movement toward your position. They are converging on the shelter. How many? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. They know we are trying to protect the civilians. Webb looked at his Marines. 300 soldiers against an army. The smart move would be to retreat, regroup, find better ground. But retreat meant abandoning 12 million people to death. Tell the fleet to drop the fire support packages, Webb ordered, and prep the secondary shelters for evacuation. We are going to make the swarm work for every meter. The Marines dug in. They set up firing positions, laid mines, created kill zones. When the swarm came, it came like a wave of living horror. Creatures of every size and shape, all hungry, all focused on reaching the shelter. The battle that followed was brutal. The Marines fired until their barrels glowed red. They fell back meter by meter to secondary positions. They used explosives to collapse terrain, channeling the swarm into narrow approaches. They called in orbital strikes from the fleet above, vaporizing entire sections of the horde. But the swarm kept coming. For every creature killed, 2 more appeared. The Marines took casualties. Body armor failed under relentless attacks. Soldiers fell. Their bodies recovered by their comrades when possible, left behind when necessary. Humans understood triage. They understood acceptable losses. What the swarm did not understand was human stubbornness. The Marines did not break. When ammunition ran low, they switched to backup weapons. When those failed, they used knives and clubs and their own augmented fists. They fought in ways that made no tactical sense, sacrificing themselves to buy time for others to reload or reposition. "Sir, we cannot hold much longer," a lieutenant shouted over the combat noise. Webb looked at his tactical display. The shelter was still intact. The doors were holding, and above them the fleet was winning the orbital battle. The last swarm ships were being torn apart by coordinated railgun fire. "We do not need to hold much longer," Webb replied. "Just a few more minutes. Those minutes cost dearly." 30 Marines died holding the line. 70 more were wounded. But when the orbital bombardment finally came, when the fleet's heavy weapons turned the surface around the shelter into glass, the shelter remained secure. The civilians inside were alive. Webb sat on a piece of rubble, his armor dented and scorched, and looked at his surviving Marines. They were exhausted, bloody, and covered in swarm biomass, and they were smiling. "We did it," someone said. "We actually did it." "We held 1 shelter," Webb corrected. "There are 47 more on this planet, and the swarm is still out there." He stood up, ignoring his aching body. "Get the wounded to the medics, reload, rest if you can, because tomorrow we do this again." The Marines groaned but obeyed, because that was what humans did. They fought impossible battles, took horrible casualties, and got up the next day to do it again. On the Perseverance, Sarah received reports from all drop zones. 8 shelters secured. 3 breached before the Marines could arrive. Hundreds of casualties among her people, but 9 million civilians saved so far. "The combined fleet is still 18 days away," her first officer reported. Sarah nodded. "Then we have 18 days to keep these people alive. Get me damage reports. Rotate the destroyers back for repairs. Send fresh drop pods to the shelters that are under heaviest pressure." She looked at the planet below, at the nightmare her people were fighting. The galaxy had been afraid of humans because they came from a death world. Now they were learning what that truly meant. Humans did not just survive death worlds. They conquered them, and they would conquer this one too or die trying. 18 days. That was how long the humans fought alone on Nephira 7th. 18 days of brutal combat, impossible odds and sacrifices that made the galaxy watch in stunned silence. The swarm adapted constantly. It created flying forms to counter the orbital bombardments. It evolved acid sprayers to melt through marine armor. It even attempted psychological attacks, mimicking human voices to lure soldiers into ambushes. But for every adaptation, the humans countered with something new. They were creative in ways the swarm could not predict. Chaotic, unpredictable, relentlessly aggressive even when defensive. By day 12, Commander Marcus Webb had lost half his Marines. The survivors looked like walking corpses running on stimulants and pure willpower, but they held 43 shelters secure. 9 million civilians alive and waiting for rescue. On day 15, the swarm changed tactics. It stopped attacking the shelters directly. Instead, it began growing massive organic structures around them, trying to seal them off from potential rescue. The humans responded by using nuclear charges to blast openings, creating corridors of glass and ash that the swarm could not quickly recolonize. Captain Sarah Chen barely slept during those 18 days. She coordinated fleet movements, managed supply drops, and made impossible decisions about which shelters could be reinforced and which had to be abandoned. Every choice cost lives. Every delay meant more civilians died. But she never stopped trying, never gave up. That was not what humans did. The combined fleet arrived on day 18 like a swarm of metal angels. 500 ships from a dozen species, the largest military force the galaxy had assembled in 2 centuries. They swept into the system with overwhelming firepower, destroying the remaining swarm vessels in orbit within hours. Ambassador Thelnox watched from the flagship's command center as human and alien forces coordinated the ground assault. The difference in tactics was startling. The combined fleet's forces were methodical, careful, professional. The humans were wild, aggressive, taking risks that made the other species commanders nervous. But it worked. Together they pushed the swarm back, shelter by shelter, meter by meter. The final battle took place at the central hive structure, a massive organic dome that covered 50 square kilometers. The swarm had concentrated its remaining forces there, preparing for a last stand. The combined fleet wanted to bombard it from orbit, annihilate it completely. Webb had a different idea. There are still civilians down there, he argued over the command channel. Shelter 47 is under that structure. 200,000 people. If you glass it from orbit, they die too. Marine commander, that shelter was reported as lost 3 days ago. A Velkari admiral responded. There is no one left to save. Then it costs us nothing to check, Webb replied. Give me 24 hours. Let my people go in. If we cannot confirm survivors, you can blast it to atoms. Thelnox made the decision. 24 hours, Commander. Make them count. Webb led the assault personally. 200 Marines, all that remained of his original 300, plus reinforcements from the combined fleet. They fought through the hive structure, facing the swarm's most evolved forms. Creatures that had adapted to counter-human tactics, that moved faster and hit harder than anything they had faced before. The Marines used explosives to blast through organic walls. They burned entire corridors with flamethrowers, denying the swarm its ability to regenerate. They pushed deeper, following scanner readings that suggested the shelter might still be intact. Webb found it 6 hours in. The shelter door was sealed, covered in hardened biological matter but still intact. He placed shaped charges and blew it open. His heart sank as he saw the interior filled with swarm biomass. Then something moved. A Velkari child covered in ash and barely conscious crawled out from under a collapsed support beam. Behind her, more movement. Survivors. Hundreds of them hiding in the deepest parts of the shelter, the only section the swarm had not reached. I have survivors, Webb shouted into his radio. Repeat, Shelter 47 has survivors.
We need immediate evac.
The rescue operation took 8 hours. Every survivor had to be carried through hostile territory, protected by Marines who fought a running battle back to the surface. But they got them out, all 197,000 of them. When the last civilian was safely aboard a rescue ship, the combined fleet unleashed hell on the hive structure. The bombardment was visible from space, a pillar of fire that consumed the last remnants of the swarm. Nephra 7 was finally free. The aftermath was overwhelming. The final count showed 47 human soldiers dead in those last 24 hours, 112 more wounded, but 9,197,000 Velkari civilians had survived. Without human intervention, all of them would have died. Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of Nephra 7's capital city, looking at the devastation. Ambassador Thelnox approached her, his skin a color she had never seen before, something between respect and shame. Captain Chen, he began, struggling for words. I was the one who argued for your quarantine. I told the assembly that humans were too dangerous to join our society. Sarah looked at him calmly. You were right. We are dangerous. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We evolved to be survivors, fighters, predators. That does not change just because we learned to build starships. But you came anyway. When we needed help despite our rejection, you came. Of course we did, Sarah replied. Being dangerous does not mean being cruel. Our world taught us to be strong, yes. But it also taught us that strength means nothing if you only use it for yourself. The strongest do not survive alone. They survive by protecting each other. Thelnox was silent for a long moment. The assembly is convening an emergency session. They want to discuss your membership application again. And what will you tell them, Ambassador? Thelnox's skin shifted to a determined blue. I will tell them that I was wrong. I saw humans as weapons, as threats, as monsters from a nightmare world. But I watched your Marines fight for people they had never met. I watched them die to protect children who were not their own. I watched Captain Chen make decisions that sacrificed her own people to save ours. That is not the behavior of monsters. That is the behavior of heroes. The vote took place 3 days later. The Galactic Assembly met in full session, every species represented. Thelnox gave his testimony. Then the survivors from Nephra 7 gave theirs. Velkari civilians who had listened to humans fight and die above their shelters, who had been carried to safety in human arms. who had seen Deathworlders cry when they could not save everyone. The vote was not close. Humanity was granted full membership, with all rights and privileges. But more than that, they were given something unprecedented: a permanent seat on the Security Council. The galaxy had decided that when darkness came, and it always came, they wanted the Deathworlders standing beside them. On the Perseverance, preparing for the journey home, Sarah received word that 17 more human colony ships were being prepared for launch. The quarantine was over. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. She stood on the observation deck watching the stars, thinking about the 47 Marines who would never see this moment. They had died so that others could live. They had shown the galaxy what humans truly were. Her first officer joined her. The Council is already talking about forming a joint defense force. They want human advisors to train their militaries in our tactics. Sarah smiled slightly. They spent 2 centuries building a peaceful civilization. Now they are learning that peace has to be protected, sometimes by people willing to do violent things in its defense. Are you okay with that? Being the galaxy's protectors? Sarah thought about the Velkari child Webb had carried out of that shelter, about the mother who had thanked her in broken English, about the 9 million souls who would see another sunrise because humans had refused to accept the word impossible. We survived the Ice Age, she said quietly. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived wars and disasters and every nightmare our planet threw at us. We did not survive by being peaceful. We survived by being stubborn, creative, and absolutely refusing to quit when things got hard. If the galaxy needs that, then yes, we will be their protectors. She turned to look at her officer, her eyes bright with determination. They were afraid of what we might do to them. We showed them what we will do for them, and that makes all the difference. The Perseverance turned toward home, toward Earth, carrying news that would change humanity forever. The galaxy had opened its arms. The Deathworlders were no longer outcasts. They were heroes. They were protectors. They were exactly what the universe needed, at exactly the right time. And in the darkness between stars, other threats stirred and plotted. But now, for the first time in 2 million years, the galaxy had something it had lacked. It had humans. And that changed everything.